Before the first Allied soldier set foot on the beaches of Normandy, the fate of D-Day was already being shaped, not just by generals or tanks, but by a hidden army you've almost certainly never heard of. How did a collection of librarians, bakers, taxi drivers, and even school children alter the course of the greatest invasion in history? Their names are missing from most textbooks, but today, their secrets are coming out. June 6, 1944. The world remembers the storming of Omaha, the desperate charges up Utah, the paratroopers dropping behind enemy lines. But let's rewind the clock. Picture a cold, gray dawn in occupied France. Beneath the surface of everyday life, a silent network is humming, passing messages, sabotaging railways, and risking everything for a hope that lives only in whispers. These are the secret heroes of D-Day. The invisible hands who tipped the scales of history when no one was watching. Let's start with a story you won't see in the movies. In a sleepy coastal village, 23-year-old Simone Seguin delivers bread every morning. But hidden beneath the baguettes in her basket are coded notes for the resistance. She's not a soldier. She's not even in uniform. But every time she cycles through Nazi checkpoints, she's carrying the weight of the invasion on her handlebars. Because one intercepted message could mean disaster for D-Day. And then there's the man they called the postman. His real name was André Postel-Vanay, and his route wasn't just letters, it was sabotage. For months before the invasion, André rode through the countryside, memorizing every train schedule, every bridge, every German outpost. When the call came, he didn't just deliver intel, he delivered chaos. His resistance cell orchestrated train derailments that left German reinforcements stranded hundreds of miles from Normandy, right as the Allies hit the beaches. But here's where it gets wild. Many of these heroes weren't even adults. The pigeons of Paris, as the Nazis mockingly called them, were street kids, some as young as 12, who darted through the city, relaying secret codes chalked on walls or tucked inside hollowed-out loaves of bread. Imagine risking your life before you've even finished grade school. Why did they do it? Because they believed someone had to fight, even if that meant being invisible. Let's pull back for a moment. The Allied invasion of Normandy was the most meticulously planned operation in history. We know about Eisenhower's grand strategy, the armada of ships, the paratroopers and gliders. But Eisenhower himself later admitted, without the French resistance and our secret networks, D-Day would have cost twice as many lives, if it succeeded at all. The generals could only plan for what they knew. The resistance delivered what they never could. Real-time eyes and ears behind enemy lines. So, who organized these secret armies? Enter the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, Britain's shadowy agency tasked with setting Europe ablaze. Their agents parachuted into France under cover of night, sometimes with nothing but a radio, a flask of brandy, and a cyanide pill. Their mission? To train, arm, and coordinate local resistance. But here's the twist. Most SOE agents didn't look like James Bond. Take Virginia Hall, an American with a wooden leg she nicknamed Cuthbert. She became so notorious that the Gestapo called her the most dangerous woman in Europe, and Hitler himself put a price on her head. Yet she eluded capture time and again, organizing sabotage missions and orchestrating escapes for downed Allied pilots. But the SOE couldn't succeed alone. The French resistance was a patchwork of rival groups, communists, Gaullists, even anarchists, who barely trusted each other, let alone outsiders. So how did they come together for D-Day? One answer. Jean Moulin. Moulin, a former prefect, unified the resistance under one banner, risking torture and death to bring warring factions to the same table. Without his efforts, the sabotage that crippled German logistics on D-Day simply wouldn't have happened. Now, let's talk about sabotage. We're not just talking about blowing up bridges, though that happened a lot. We're talking about creative, almost cinematic acts of rebellion. Like the group of Parisian taxi drivers who, instead of ferrying German officers, filled their tanks with sugar and sand, leaving convoys stalled for hours. Or the telephone operators who accidentally redirected calls, sowing confusion at German command posts. Even laundresses and barbers played their part, slipping coded updates to the Allies or passing on rumors about troop movements. One of the most unsung networks was run by women, ordinary women, but with extraordinary courage. Take Odette Sansom, a mother of 3, who volunteered for the SOE and parachuted into France under cover of darkness. When she was eventually captured, tortured, and sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp, she refused to betray her contacts, telling the Gestapo, "You have your methods, I have mine." She survived, but many didn't. These women weren't just couriers, they were the backbone of the entire Shadow War. And then there are the stories that sound almost unbelievable. Like the Phantom Army, created by double agents and illusionists. With inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and bogus maps, they convinced the Germans that the main invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. One agent, Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, ran an entire fake spy network, feeding the Nazis a steady diet of lies so convincing that even after the Normandy landings, Hitler refused to move his panzer divisions south, believing the real attack was still to come. But it wasn't just the French or the British. Polish, Belgian, and Dutch agents braved unspeakable danger, too. They mapped minefields, sabotaged railways, and guided paratroopers through unfamiliar terrain. Each small act added up, creating a web of resistance so resilient that the Nazis never managed to stamp it out. What made these secret heroes risk everything? For some, it was patriotism; for others, revenge for loved ones lost to the Gestapo. But for most, it was simply the knowledge that if they didn't act, no one would. They fought not for medals or glory, but for the freedom of strangers they would never meet. Let's zoom into a single night, just days before the invasion. Deep in the forests near Caen, a group of resistance fighters, barely more than boys, waits in the darkness. Their mission: destroy a railway viaduct to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the coast. They know the consequences if they're caught: torture, execution, reprisals against their families. Still, they press on, carrying explosives smuggled in crates marked cheese. The charge is set. The viaduct collapses. A German armored train derails, blocking the line for days. The next morning, as the Allies surge ashore, those few minutes of sabotage saved countless lives. And what about the locals who never picked up a weapon? The shopkeeper who left his lights on in a coded pattern to signal incoming paratroopers. The farmer's wife who hid Allied airmen in her cellar for months. The priest who smuggled microfilm in a hollowed-out Bible. Their stories rarely make the headlines, but without them, the invasion might have ended in catastrophe. Now, let's bust a myth. The popular image of D-Day is one of overwhelming Allied might, unstoppable waves of men and machines. But the truth? The margin for error was razor-thin. Had the Germans known the true location or timing of the landings, they could have thrown in the full weight of their panzer divisions and crushed the beachhead before it ever took hold. What stopped them? Not just Allied firepower, but 1,000 acts of quiet sabotage, misinformation, and courage behind enemy lines. Consider this. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, German command grew paralyzed by reports of uprisings, sabotage, and phantom armies. Field Marshal Rommel, tasked with defending the Atlantic Wall, complained he was fighting ghosts. Meanwhile, Allied planners received a constant flow of real-time intelligence, troop movements, minefields, even the daily menu in German mess halls. How? Because of secret heroes who risked everything for a cause they believed was worth dying for. And yet, the price was staggering. For every successful act of sabotage, there were reprisals, villages burned, families executed, entire communities wiped out. The Nazis made examples of resistance fighters, hanging them from lampposts or shooting them in public squares. Still, the network endured, always adapting, always finding new ways to fight. It's a sobering reminder. Freedom is never free. It's paid for by those willing to stand up, even when the world isn't watching. Let's pause for a moment and ask, why do these stories matter? Why dig up the tales of bakers, schoolteachers, and children whose names might never appear in history books? Because the story of D-Day isn't just about armies and generals. It's about ordinary people who became extraordinary, not because they wanted to be, but because history demanded it. Take the example of Denise Bloch, a secretary-turned-wireless operator, who sent messages from her attic so often her fingers bled from tapping the Morse code key. She knew every transmission could be her last. German direction-finding vans prowled the streets, searching for signals. When she was eventually captured and executed, her last words were for her family, but her legacy lived on in every Allied success on D-Day. Or consider the unsung role of the Brigade Blanche, a group of women in white uniforms, posing as Red Cross nurses, who smuggled weapons and explosives in their medical kits. Their cover allowed them to move freely, passing checkpoints with a smile while hiding tools of resistance under their skirts. And what about the taxi driver known only as Pierre? In the days after the landings, with the roads clogged and wounded piling up, Pierre ferried injured resistance fighters to hidden safe houses, never asking for payment, never revealing his real name. He disappeared after the war, but those he saved remembered him not as a hero, but as a friend. It's easy to forget that war is not just fought on battlefields. It's fought in kitchens, on bicycles, in whispers exchanged in crowded train stations. The secret heroes of D-Day remind us that history is shaped not just by those with power, but by those with courage, often silent, often unseen. Here's a question. If you lived under occupation, would you have the courage to fight in the shadows? To risk your life for strangers, for a future you might never see? The men and women of the resistance didn't know if the Allies would succeed. They didn't know if freedom would ever return. But they fought anyway. That's what makes them heroes, not the medals, not the recognition, but the willingness to stand up when the world seemed darkest. The next time you hear about D-Day, remember, the beaches were only the final act. The invasion began months, even years, earlier, in the hearts of those who chose to resist. Their stories are not just footnotes, they're the beating heart of the history we inherit. So, the next time you walk down a quiet street or ride a city bus, think about the secret heroes who once carried coded messages, sabotaged enemy plans, and risked everything for a chance at freedom. Their courage changed the world, even if history almost forgot their names. If you want to hear more untold stories, forgotten heroes, and the hidden corners of the past that textbooks miss, subscribe to History Owl and join our community of history detectives. Because here, we believe that every story, no matter how small, deserves to be remembered.